project that we're working on is we're actually working on a grant from the Washington Foundation, and we are doing a complete rewrite of our COVID guidance for the child care setting, and that will roll out on a yet to be determined date. Because as you can imagine, both of these efforts are a monumental task and take a huge amount of staff time. So Holly, before I get rolling, is there anything you want to add?
Oh, I just think we should recognize Jess for
Oh
her
yeah.
her efforts. She was one of our peer reviewers on the summer camp COVID toolkit, and she really made it, really made some really great input that really made it a better product. So thank you, Jess, for helping us out. You were great to work with, and we really appreciated it.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now, and then we can get rolling. And so if you haven't ever been familiar with the Montana Learning Center, we started our work up at Canyon Ferry Lake in the mid-1980s. And it was under a different organization, but same kind of activities and whatnot. We were started by two Helena area science teachers, Gil and Marilyn Alexander, and the organization was called the Canyon Ferry Limnological Institute. And they basically did summer programs for high school students. And many of those were research opportunities where the kids got to work with local researchers and do projects. And some of the kids went on to win state and international science fairs like ISEF. So it really got to be a great opportunity for kids. And there's programs that's kind of have stemmed off of that, like with Rebecca with the Discovery Foundation. Like I believe the Youth Forest Monitoring Program with Liz Burke was started at the center with Gil and Marilyn Alexander, and so we're happy to see that program continue. But the Learning Center has kind of changed and morphed over time. When the Alexanders retired in 2003, in 2004, the Learning Center was formed, and I've been involved with the center almost 10 years now. By trade, I was a middle school science teacher. I taught in the classroom for 7 years, but the opportunity came to leave the classroom and be the full-time executive director with the Learning Center, and I took it. And I did that because I was doing that in like a volunteer role for the Learning Center while I was teaching and overseeing their summer camps and everything else. And so, I'm very, very excited and blessed to be where I'm at today with the Learning Center and the good work that we do. And so the Montana Learning Center, we offer several programs. Some of our most known programs are our summer camps for kids. And I was talking to Jess a little bit earlier. We are having the same problem that the Montana Outdoor Science School is having, and it's a good problem. Summer camp registration has been open for 5 weeks, and in 5 weeks we set an all-time camp record, and we're still getting camp registration. So right now I'm looking at hiring additional staff to kind of cope with that. And then also, while Holly and I work on the child care guidance, I'm revising what we're doing for the summer camp setting. But I do want to share that, we were able to operate 27 out of 30 of our face-to-face camps last summer, and we had 0 reported COVID cases. And these are overnight camps. We had 330 kids. And so compared to similar programs, that puts that number over 600. And then we had 30 staff and no cases of COVID. And so, we did some pretty extreme things. Like on the weekend, I would actually get suited up in a hazmat suit. And, we did some pretty extreme things. Like I would go through and basically spray everything down with a food grade disinfectant, but we can visit that one later on. But if you haven't been to our facility, We've got a 10-acre facility up at Canyon Ferry Lake. It was built in the late 1940s, 1948 to be exact. And literally it was the dam village for the engineers and their families while the dam was being built. And so, everything's real rustic because it was built in 48. But we feature 15 cottages, or the site features 15 cottages. We've made 8 of those into dorms, and those dorms sleep 12 apiece, 96 people total. In recent years, we replaced all the bedding and all the mattresses, so that's all brand new. We're making upgrades and as much as we can afford, especially in recent years. We have 4 classrooms, and the classrooms serve anywhere on like the tan and pink can serve 10 to 15, and then the green and blue can serve 20 to 25. And just even in those, in recent years, we've replaced all of the classroom materials like the tables and chairs. And then we also have a dining hall. In our dining hall, we're working towards moving over to a commercial kitchen. And so we've made a lot of upgrades there. And then my background's in astronomy. I worked for a professional observatory while I was going to college, both on site and remotely, while I was up at MSU as well. And we have a strong astronomy program. I've got 2 observatories, and the 3rd is in the works. And so it's really a beautiful, beautiful place. And so we not only offer summer learning camps for kids, we offer teacher trainings. We are one of 2 NASA education partners in the state of Montana, MSU being the other one. Yearly, we have 10 online courses for teachers through our NASA work that are currently rolling. We also oversee the Western Aerospace Scholars Program for the state of Montana. And then we have, various other, I hope to get back to our face-to-face teacher training soon as of this fall, where we do some training for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and also the Department of Transportation too. My other kind of interest is aeronautics too. And so we do a flight workshop where we actually rent planes and flight instructors and take teachers flying for a weekend. And so that's a lot of fun. And so we try to offer unforgettable learning experiences, not just for kids, but for adults too. We have a strong astronomy program, like just Rebecca said. It's the largest public use telescope in the state of Montana. And we not only have telescopes at our Canyon Ferry facility, we also have a remote telescope that allows us to partner with University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and that instrument is located in New Mexico. And so kind of to start like diving into the whole COVID discussion, I kind of wanted to give a little history. And this was back in April. It all really happened fast because a lot of the pandemic related funding and opportunities, they all happened fast because this was all new for everybody involved. And we were asked to kind of lead discussions around science education groups in Montana, and groups that lead summer camps. We were invited to do a session or contribute to, like a listening session where and this is available on our website under our news section. And we actually drafted a response or guidance to Governor Bullock and his coronavirus task force. And that was based on recommendations that we came up as a group in a call in mid-April. And, this was signed by those organizations. I think we had over 20 participate, the largest being the State United Way and YMCA. And so we were really thankful for this opportunity. It really opened some doors for us. And it led to some other things as well. Like we were given the opportunity to participate in focus groups around the CARES Act funding that came to the state of Montana, specifically for the child care setting, and then also the nonprofit setting. And I'm really thankful for that opportunity for our organization because it opened up doors and it kept us running. And, like other camps are seeing now, parents want to get their kids out and about for the summer because cabin fever has struck. And, we're already closing camps. We're already setting a summer camp enrollment record for the summer, but it's a good problem to be in, but how do you deal with that? And so one of the things that we did last year is Holly and I developed a toolkit for nonprofits that offer summer camps for kids. And, we provided that free of charge to about 20 nonprofit organizations across the state. The largest organizations that requested that were Yellowstone National Park and Montana State University. So we're thrilled to see organizations of that caliber, coming to us for what we did. But we're so excited to have done this opportunity. Whether it was a small organization like us to a large organization like MSU or Yellowstone. And so basically, what it entailed is we took on the monumental task of, not only looking at local guidance with the Lewis and Clark County Health Department, also looking at state guidance, and then most importantly, CDC guidance, and putting that all together in a package. And it turned out to be about 150 pages. So it's massive. But we had to do that because, not only as organizations, you want to do the best for your staff, but also the students and teachers and community that you serve. But, this is all new ground for us. So, we wanted to give our best, put our best foot forward. And, the product that we put together was peer reviewed. I'm so thankful that we did that. Jess was one of our peer reviewers with Montana Outdoor Science School. We also had individual from the Lewis and Clark County Health Department to provide that aspect too, was a peer review out. But unfortunately, things have changed so much in the last 9 months that we're basically, I don't want to say it, completely trashing that document and rewriting it because there's new guidance, and we're given the opportunity now to kind of expand our reach. And that the toolkit that we did last year was for summer camps for nonprofits. This year, the toolkit, whenever that rolls out, because it's so massive, it's going to be going out to the child care setting across the state. And there's even talk about it going out nationally. And so we're kind of taking on a monumental task, so to speak. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what we did specialty for our summer camps. Then I'll turn it over to Holly, and then I'll open it up for the group. We had 330 overnight campers and 30 staff, so 360 people that we worked with over a 10-week period last summer. Fortunate enough to have no COVID cases, but I would say what we did was to the extreme, not only to protect our staff, but the participants and the community that we serve. Really that started out ahead of time, like prefacing with parents of, hey, we're in a pandemic. This is what's coming when you come, not only checking in, but while your child is at camp. And so it started out with that early communication with parents. They really appreciated it. And then, when we'd have special drop off and pick up and sign in procedures and screening procedures as campers would come in. And, with campers and our staff, we would not only screen staff and campers daily, well, we would screen them daily, but we tried to isolate camps as best as we could because we had anywhere from 3 to 4 camps occurring simultaneously at the same time at the facility. And so it was really important for us to do that well and to do it right. And so, with having those 4 camps, luckily we have 4 separate classroom buildings. Luckily, we have great weather. So literally the best thing that you can do for, the setting is to be outside, right? As soon as you step indoors, the number of protocols go basically through the roof, so to speak. And so, while everyone was indoors, they were masked. Like even with our dining hall, because we have our own cooking staff on site. Campers would go wash their hands. They would mask up. There would be a staff person at the door. They'd sanitize their hands at the door. Then we had markers on the floor. They were spaced 6 feet apart. We had another staff member pacing kids as they went through the line, and all of our staff, had gloves, masked up, and they served kids their meals. And so, no, the kids weren't reaching for anything. They were getting everything from us. And then they would go back to their respected areas. And luckily for us, the weather was awesome for the summertime. And, we ate outside as much as possible. And even, we were lucky enough to get CARES Act related funding. And we have 12 picnic tables, so 3 picnic tables per camp, per building, and we arranged them around the facility so no camp was interacting with the other. But really, our camps were small enough during COVID that our day campers were the only true camp that was isolated from the other camps, mainly because we transported them from a Helena location to the learning center daily and returned them back there. And so our 2 overnight camps, like our 4th through 6th graders and 7th through 9th graders, or high school camps. Like high school camp was separated, but the 4th through 6th grade and 7th through 9th grade, those camp numbers were small enough that they could mingle. And so, that really, we felt that social emotional aspect was huge. Not only with the games and everything, that way they got to, be among their peers. And we were thankful that we could do that. But, not only with, simple things that you could do with like masking, we really are fortunate, like a lot of the organizations on this call, to get COVID related funding for PPP or, other funding for the child care setting, to where, you could install, like, we installed a commercial high temperature dishwasher to sanitize, what we did with the kitchen. And so, we're thankful for those types of opportunities, because otherwise, I mean, it would be a different story for a lot of us. I mean, early on, we were really concerned about making it through the year. But we made it through the year, and, we're doing well this year, all things considered, even still being in a pandemic. But, it's like, so early on, or just important guidance: mask, hand sanitize, right? Just common sense type stuff. I mean, we're an outdoor, well, this conversation, or the conversations involving organizations that are outdoor education. And so, we are a science-based organization, so we rely heavily on science and facts and whatnot. And that has put in play a lot of what we do, even with like, we would have our staff, after the campers with the overnight camp would check out, we'd have our staff go through and clean. After they would clean, I would literally get in a hazmat suit. and Holly has seen the picture, where I had basically a fogging machine with a food grade disinfectant, and we would spray everything down: walls, tables, chairs, floors, beds, mattresses, everything.
Vehicle
But yeah, oh yeah,
inside
yeah,
your
inside of
vans.
vehicles too. Yeah, yeah. And while you bring up the vehicles, some things that we did, because, we did do a couple offsite field trips with our older kids, but the vehicles were mainly used by our day campers, because we transported them by van to and from camp every day. And so it's like, well, what happens, when you're using a vehicle every day? Just with the day campers, we would go in and sanitize that several times a day, like once in the morning when they're transferred, after they get back. But if our older campers went and used the van for like a field trip to go hiking, right? What we would do is actually do, a deep clean before and after as well. They would come back. The kids would sanitize their hands before they go in the van. They'd be masked up. And we would actually have extra staff in the van, especially with the littles. Are you wearing your mask? And wearing your mask counts as covering your nose and your mouth, kind of thing. So just reinforcing that positively was huge. So there's a lot of things that we did in place. I'm not going to discuss everything, and I think that's a good transition to kind of hand the ball over to Holly, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to the group. Holly?
Thanks, Ryan. I just have a couple things that I wanted to mention for people. And one of them is I was fortunate to see a discussion in an article by the New York Times about a mindset, in essence, to develop when you're planning what your organization is going to do with respect to COVID. And they call it the Swiss cheese model. And I know that sounds funny, but what it really is talking about is if you think no one technique is good enough to deal with COVID across the board. And so what you need to develop, and you can see from what Ryan was talking about, what you really need to do is develop a multi-layered approach. And the new guidance that the CDC has released in the school and childcare area, like they hammer that over and over again. And so the Swiss cheese model is basically, you think of the piece of Swiss cheese and it's got holes. Well, if you pile another slice on top of it, some of the first slice's holes get covered, but you got other holes. And so you literally, the thought is that if you piled a whole bunch of Swiss cheese up, you would wind up with virtually no holes showing for the whole stack. And that's what you really want. You want the various techniques you adopt to, in essence, complement each other and fill in the gaps where different techniques won't help. And so that we're actually going to be incorporating that into the new toolkit that Ryan was referring to, because to me, it was such a really good way of conceptualizing how to plan and how to decide what your organization is going to do for COVID, because it really gives you the flexibility, but it also helps you, visualize that that's what's going on. As Ryan said, outdoors is always best, but I'm sure many of your programs have classroom components. And the other thing to be aware of is that fixes don't have to be expensive. I know, yes, the hazmat suit and the Ghostbusters backpack thing that Ryan had was not cheap, but it can be simple. Like the Learning Center doesn't have an HVAC system because it was built in 1948. So we opened windows and they opened windows and doors. It's simple stuff. Installing an exhaust fan in a window to pull the air out of the room will help. A standing HEPA air purifier, which I know from a personal perspective costs maybe 100, 150 for a really nice unit. So there are relatively inexpensive things that people can do that make a huge difference. And if you're interested, I think you guys have my contact information, but if not, they can kind of get it for you. But basically, there's this wonderful interactive illustration of how airflows in a classroom work. Again, New York Times, you have to understand, I'm originally from New York and I'm a newspaper snob. So sorry about that, guys. But it's actually, I showed it to Ryan, and it's really a fascinating, you can scroll through and it will show you how different techniques impact the airflow if you have one infected kid in your room. Thank you, Jess, for sending out my contact info. Appreciate that. Oh, there it is. So this is, if you actually, Ryan's kind of scrolling through it, you can start to see how they imaged but there's also text, as you can also see, that goes with this, but that's the sick kit, the red and stuff. So this is in a closed room is what they're showing you here. So you can see how awful it is. And then they'll start, okay, now it's going out the window. And there's a HEPA filter that'll pop up towards the end as you look at this. There's a fan in and a fan out version. This is the in the next one that comes up is the out. So this gives you an idea. I'm happy to share it. Most people can get a few stories for free from the Times digitally. So hopefully you won't have a problem accessing this. Like I said, I've just, email me and I'll send you the link. And then, so that's the other thing I wanted to make sure everyone realized is that small, inexpensive stuff can make a huge difference. And then finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the CDC guidance. For those of you who may or may not have heard, on March 19th, the CDC issued new guidance for schools. And part of that new guidance is, oh, Ryan posted the link for that thing he was just scrolling through. So there you have it. If you want to get the link for the Swiss cheese discussion, you can reach me for that too. But anyway, so the new CDC guidelines, what really hit the news was, oh, it's okay to have kids 3 feet apart in a classroom. But what people haven't talked about are all the caveats to that. And so I wanted to make you aware that yes, you can have the students 3 feet apart in a classroom, but, and there's a lot of but, adults still should be 6 feet apart. In common areas, you should still have them 6 feet apart. I mean, it goes on and on. So that's one of the things that definitely will make it into the new toolkit. I mean, one of the problems we've been having, we had hoped to get this out like way back in like January, but the fact of the matter is almost every bit of guidance that we used for the summer camp one has been, totally revised. A lot of that, unfortunately, is tied to the change in the political things that happened, because we went from Governor Bullock being very detailed and the federal government not so much, to now exactly that opposite, where most of the really detailed guidance is coming out of the CDC, and basically the Montana guidance is follow the CDC guidance. So we will be definitely addressing, but I just want to make sure people realized, yes, it's 3 feet, but there's a lot of times when that doesn't apply. The other big thing they talk about is what Ryan was talking about with the isolating kids in little groups. That's called cohorting, and it is a key part of prevention, because the fewer people that mix with any given group, the less likelihood you're going to have an infection. So if you can keep groups of kids together, whether they're indoors, outdoors, doesn't matter, try to keep your classes or your courses, whatever, separate. That makes a huge difference, because, and it also helps if you do have an infection with contact tracing. You're not trying to find 400 people, you're trying to find 20. So that was all I wanted to get out there.
Holly, even with us, we not only did that with kids or program participants, we also did that with staff too.
And with parents, we tried to ask parents to have the same parent drop off and pick up. I mean, that's a little thing, but it matters, because hopefully that person didn't get infected in the middle, but the toolkit even covered that. The reason the toolkit was so huge was when we first started pulling it together, we realized the guidance was scattered all over the internet, and it was hard to find everything. So what we tried to build was, you never have to leave these pages to know what to do. It has planning, it has examples of what the Learning Center did. It has all kinds, and it did have some links, but they were sort of more supplemental. And that philosophy is going to continue in the child care toolkit. Ryan and I have talked about it. The only way to make it smaller would be to pull that, to totally change that mindset. And I just talked to enough people when we were doing the original one to realize that having to poke all over the internet makes people cuckoo. So that's kind of where we're coming. Someone just popped up when we think we're going to have it. I'd say probably April. That's the goal. I have about 5 inches of guidance to wander through before I can even start figuring out where the changes need to be. And the manual part, so there was 2 pieces. There was a manual, and then there were graphics and tools like screening tools. All of that, most of that is going to change. And so that's, you know, I have to figure out where all those changes are going to go. So that's kind of why
you know, it's like,
going to be
you
a
know,
while.
we're not only working on the guidance, but we're working on ways to how to convey that too. And so like last time we brought in a graphic artist to help us make some special customized graphics, especially for the Montana setting, because those resonated well. So we're pulling Angie in again. And, you know, even Holly and I are even going to talk after this in a separate call on, you know, what we're going to have her start on and whatnot. And so, you know, I guess what we'd like to do now is kind of open it up for questions. Really didn't go into specifics because Holly did mention the classroom type model. You know, we did have overnight camps, and, you know, those kids are isolated in dorms, right? But, you know, just like she said, simple things, open the windows. You know, we had 1 to 2 fans in every room, and each of those fans had a special filter on the back. And so, you know, it's just a lot of little things that add up to make a big difference. So, you know, I'll go ahead and open it up. Jess or Rebecca, do either of you kind of want to moderate it, or do you want me to, or what are you thinking?
I'm happy to look in the chat and moderate that. Rebecca, if you want to keep watch on like who's unmuting themselves that way. And then also I definitely, like Ryan mentioned, questions. I'm also really curious to know, like, you know, what has worked for you all. So if it's not even a question, but it's like, hey, the beginning we were struggling with this, but now this summer we've got it down, and you know, that's valid opening dialogue as well. So please. And if y'all are still eating lunch, that's fine too, but.
While we're waiting, I just kind of also wanted to quick jump in, and if somebody wants to talk, just interrupt me. But just so you know, the toolkit, the childcare toolkit, when we talk about childcare, we are not just limiting it to 0 to 5. It's going to literally be from birth to high school. So it will cover school program, after school or out of school programs, which I suspect that will be the parts that are most beneficial for many of you. But it is going to cover all of it, and it will be distributed at no cost to every child care provider in the state that we know about. And if they want the manual part in Word so they can tinker with it for their own situation, they will be allowed to do that. There's some paperwork involved because that's where the lawyer in me comes in. But there is a lot of, you know, so if you know, work with Lori Bishop's group or Megan Holyfield's group, if you work with either of them, they are going to be helping us to make sure we get it to those people who need it. So,
and for those that you don't know, that's Montana After School Alliance, and then also Child Care Connections. We are also working with Montana Nonprofit Association too. Joe, did you have your hand raised?
So
I did have a question, but I think Lori Wolf also has a question.
Yeah, and can I interrupt you? Because Ryan, you just actually, someone else asked something you were talking about. Will we be able to, like, will you let MEEA know when it's finished, that we can like send it out to the network?
Yeah. So I'll let MEEA know, and we'll do a press release. It's going to go out broadly. And the one thing that we're going to do differently this time around is, you know, how we're going to track it with the PDF. Easiest way to get it's going to be a PDF. And so, you know, you go to the web link on our website. That way we can track how many people have downloaded it, right? Otherwise, if you want access to the document itself to kind of morph, like copy and paste and morph, into your own document for your own organization, that's where that extra step will come with Holly, and then you can request that. And we just have some, little things to do tied to that. So that'll be coming later. And really, realistically, a lot of this guidance changes, and, a lot of the guidance, some guidance didn't, like the 3 feet didn't come out until early or late last week, early this week. And so, we're implementing it as best as we can and putting that together in a package that would be, good for everybody involved. Just
It's definitely a moving target.
Set a hard date for you, Holly. Yeah, I'll open it up to the rest too. In the answer to, did anyone hire additional staff in order to handle all of the additional duties? And Ryan, you can kick it off, but then others, feel free to jump in on the chat or on your mic too.
Yeah, so we hired 30% additional staffing, and thankfully, because of COVID-related funding, we didn't have to take that hit, so to speak. But it's not only with instruction or counselors, it's also cleaners and cooking staff, at least in our example too. So I'll pass it to somebody else.
So I guess my question was mostly for Holly and the inner lawyer and you, as you were saying previously. As you guys are looking to this new addition, how are you navigating potentially conflicting CDC and governor's guidance? One of the things, and I'm not super familiar with the CDC's recommendations for classrooms but I'm just curious. I know in some areas where it's like around masking, where masking is suggested, but then CDC requires it. Just kind of curious how you guys are navigating that.
Well, the important thing to realize is the CDC guidance isn't law. So it's really recommendations. And Ryan, and I'll give you an example from when we first started working on the camp toolkit. We were originally going to have the kids masked like most of the time. And when Ryan said that, I forget how many people canceled. And we realized very quickly that parents were not going to be on board with that, even though that was the CDC recommendation. So one of the things to realize is you get to choose. We try to balance basically, and Ryan and I had a lot of conversations on how do you do this balancing act between what is the super most protective way to do it and what's really kind of acceptable and feasible. And so what the toolkit did is it kind of laid out, well, first of all, every piece of recommendations in there clearly identified where it came from. So that was helpful because people could know, which was state, which was federal. One of the differences in this version is because it's going to be distributed so widely, we are ripping out all the local guidance we had in there. We did have some Lewis and Clark County stuff, and we're taking it out. It's just, we can't cover 56 counties. And so there is some, but basically the new administration in Montana has kind of stepped back and sort of said, business people, and in this case, also nonprofit organizations, you guys know your businesses best. Look at the CDC guidance and then do what you think makes sense for your business. I mean, if I had to summarize the guidance in Montana right now, that's it. It's very, very open. There's very little specifics. And so, like I said, it's really flipped from and that's what's making redoing the toolkit such a challenge, is literally everything's been flip-flopped. The CDC guidance is 10 times more detailed than it was when we did the camp thing last year. And some of that's what we learned, but a lot of it's also mindset, and so it's a balancing act. One of the legally pieces though, is we actually had the staff and the parents basically execute a document that had them recognizing that there was a risk to sending their kids to in-person camp, and accepting that risk and basically saying the learning center wouldn't be liable if their kids or themselves or got sick.
Yeah.
And from a legal perspective, that's only valid if we did, sort of as much as was reasonable to minimize the risk of infection. And so that's kind of where our mindset was, is we wanted those waivers of liability to hold up. The toolkit does have the staff one at the back end, at the back of it, so you can see kind of what I'm talking about. And it does actually have, we'll probably move the parental one, which is currently in the thing, back to the end as well. So that's the other piece of it, is it's really about how much risk you as an organization are willing to take on, and weighing that with the costs. And that's why we were talking about, it doesn't take expensive stuff to make a big difference with the ventilation and stuff like that. So I don't know if that, Joe, did that answer what you were asking?
That and then
Joe,
some,
did
Holly.
that give you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from a very different perspective as a state agency, not a nonprofit. And so we have maybe a little bit different hierarchies that we have to follow and prioritize. But in particularly, you mentioning CDC guidance is not law is really important.
It is not. And actually, there's a section in the beginning of the manual that talks extremely about the difference between real guidance, stiff guidance and recommendations. And there's really virtually nothing that's in law, because that's the Congress, state legislature. The only thing actually now that's legal, that's really truly law, is in Montana, a bill was passed in this legislature to actually minimize business, including nonprofit, liability for infections. There's actually, and the new toolkit will talk about that bill, but there's actually a bill that makes it a lot harder to sue an organization or a business, whether you're staff or a customer or what have you, because someone got infected. So in that sense, it's actually the calculus, the weighing part, the pros and cons part, has actually that in Montana, it's a very different analysis than it might be in, let's say, New York or something else, because of that statute. They've tried to get it at the federal level. It's never going to get through.
So Holly, I'm going to jump in. Rebecca,
Yeah.
I think we've got a couple of things popping up in the chat. If you want to read those off, I'll get started and then we can pass it.
Sure. Yeah. So we are at 12:56. So I think these will be the last couple questions that we have to take. And one thing that comes up in the chat is, were you able to maintain 6 feet of distance when you're outside? And do you have a difference in ability to maintain that distance between staff and participants when you're outside?
Yeah. So with that, like Holly was saying, we're doing grouping, right? But the best environment that you can be is outside. But we are working with kids, right? And it's impossible literally to maintain that. And so, we do the best that we can, but kids are in the lake, kids are swimming. They're not going to be 6 feet apart. It's just taking simple precautions. Like indoors, we enforce that as much as we could. So like in the dormitory setting, you'd have bunk beds, right? So one child would sleep this way, right, on the second bunk or the bottom bunk, and then the other child would sleep this way. That way you've got a diagonal, and that diagonal is greater than 6 feet. We also place bunk beds 6 feet apart, but again, you're in a confined space. And so it's really, really, really difficult. Again, it is a suggestion. We tried to follow as much as we could. But, now that guidance has been revised to 3 feet with precaution, being in place. Is there another question, Rebecca?
Lori's just kind of mentioning that it was challenging as a state agency not to get into an enforcement role when they were told not to do that. And then requiring extra staff to try to maintain programs at a time that's already going to be financially difficult for everybody.
Mhm. Yeah, and we face the same challenges. You know, unfortunately, we were in a state agency in certain regards, and with that, it's like, we had to enforce the mask mandate, like in check-in. Like, I could give you an example. We had one individual who was dropping off a child and they wouldn't wear a mask. And so we basically flat out told them that, you're going to wear a mask while you're dropping off your child, interacting with us, or you can turn around and your child's not in this camp. And, that was only one case out of 330 participants that we had. And other than that, we did see registration drop because we were so protective in what we did. And, I would say we had 50 related COVID cancellations. So we would have had 380 overnight campers. But, that being said, I mean, all things considered, I think it, went off really well. And I'm thankful we didn't have any infections. But I do see concerns because, trying to turn people away, it's not what we want to do as people, right? But we are, at least, for us, we're basing it off of what we do off of science. And, we're trying to keep everybody involved safe. And, that's why we have large scale events, or we've had them in the past. Those have all been taken off the schedule. Like, we were going to do the Big Sky Star Festival this summer, or public star parties that get hundreds of people. And, those are all going until further notice. That way we can focus on smaller type events like our summer learning camps for kids or teacher trainings type things. Anything else, Rebecca?
That was it from the chat. If anyone wants to ask additional questions, you're welcome to stay on, unmute, type them in the chat. But as for right now, I am going to invite everybody to come back at 7. It's not going to be in this room. It's going to be in the other room. So check your schedule for the link and come back for trivia this evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. So
Thank
Holly and
you so
I'll
much
stay
for-
on if anybody wants to keep asking questions. What they did.
Perfect. Have you had any luck getting vaccinations for your staff?
So I get my first shot a week from today. And I'm going to get the Pfizer 2-dose. But right now we're really a skeleton crew, at least during the winter time. But like my maintenance staff, we have 3 part-time people. They all fall in the categories. 2 out of the 3 are vaccinated already. The 3rd, in my boat kind of thing.
And Rebecca, the other thing is the vaccination issue will actually also be in the toolkit, a discussion of what employers can and can't do, because that's a question, is can you force your employees to get vaccinated? Things like that. So we are going to actually at least have some stuff on that as well. We're trying to, again, with this soup to nuts idea of like, you never have to go outside these pages. So you may want to let people, if anyone has questions about the vaccination stuff, know that the toolkit will at least talk about those kinds of things, not like which vaccine you should get or any of that, but more of the legal connotations.
Yeah, and it's like, for me, from
vaccination.
an executive director standpoint, I can't enforce people get vaccinated, but you bet that I am really encouraging it, kind of thing. And thankfully, we try to hire a really high caliber staff. All of our instructors, all of our counselors are certified teachers. And because of they're certified teachers, they're in the classroom ready. And a lot of those folks are getting vaccinated too.
Hey, Holly, can you tell me how to get a copy of this? I realize you said it won't be out until sometime in April, but how do you get a copy? Or even
so
electronic?
Well, what we're gonna do, and Ryan is gonna notify, I don't,
Yeah.
did you say Mia? Is that who you
Yeah,
said?
so I'll notify Mia, Trudy, and then they're gonna distribute the release. And then I'm,
So basically, there's gonna be an email with a link to a special page
Mhm.
on our website, on the Learning Center's website. And so you will just be able to download from there. It'll
Okay.
probably be zipped because it's like 10 meg. It's huge. I forget what the size was. It was so large that when I was emailing it to people with the summer version, we actually, I would send them a second email to let them know I sent it in case it got tracked in somebody's firewall, because it was like 10 megabytes or whatever. It was big. And then if people want to use it for their staff procedures, which is what we sent it out in Word for the 20 camps. We will not be doing that automatically this time, so that we can get it to more people all at once.
Mhm.
But people will be told that they can request the Word version if they fill out a form and sign an agreement saying they basically won't pass it on to anybody, because it is the camp one has been copyrighted. We will probably copyright this one because, as far as we know, there's nothing like it anywhere else in the country available. And like, for example, the ACA, the American Camp Association, their field guide, you can't copy from it. You can't, I mean, you literally can't even do a copy and paste. And so we wanted to make it so people could use it in lieu of, for their staff manual, their procedures manual. And we're still going to allow people to do that if they want to. We're just not going to do it on the mass scale the way we did, because of it's being distributed very differently this time.
that answer your question, Trudy?
Yeah, so I'll just wait for Mia to send out an email. And so are they going to send that out to everyone that is part of this conference, or how do you get on their list? Maybe that's a question for Rebecca.
Yeah, so you can get on the MEEA general list using the website. There's a newsletter sign up area, but then also I will make sure that Jess knows we want it sent out to all of the conference attendees, as well as the MEEA list. So I'm hoping it'll go to both, and anybody that's not at the conference would want to see that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else still want to have any questions before we sign off? Cool, well, I think we're good. Holly,
Well,
if
thank
you
you so much for your time,
would-
for being flexible with us, starting a little bit late, ending a little bit late. But I think people got a lot out of this, so thank you very much.
Yeah, it's
You're
all
welcome.
good. Thank you
Thanks for
the
having us.
opportunity, Rebecca. We sure appreciate it. I'll be on throughout the conference. Holly, if you want to give me a call in 5,
I
is that
will.
okay? Perfect.
Yeah, 5.
Thanks.